This time it's the classic Moto Guzzi V35 Imola.
Look at you, you're so tiny and cute.
It's not that small.
Yes it is, it's tiny. Look at it.
It's sizes and everything, you know.
You keep telling yourself that.
So is Deb right?
No.
But let's find out for ourselves. Let's take the bike out and see what we make of it. Moto Guzzi introduced the V35 Imola in 1979 as a sportier version of the V35, which had been the first of their small block bikes to be released. The engine was an air-cooled 90-degree overhead valve V-twin of 346cc with a bore and stroke of 66 by 50.6. Peak power was a claimed 36 horsepower at 8,100 RPM. There was 5 speeds, shaft drive, and all in all the bike weighed in at 348 pounds or 158 kilos. The bike had an excellent Tonti frame and top speed was somewhere just over 95 miles an hour. Right, so come back, and of course it's now started raining.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Good.
So, overall impressions. The engine is 36 horsepower, but 30 horsepower at the back wheel. So they claim. But how does that actually feel in the real world? Does it feel sluggish?
Definitely not. It feels pretty damn good if I say so myself. Of course, it hasn't got the top speed of more horsepower bikes, but do you really need it? I feel like. But its acceleration for like general use is surprisingly good for a little 350.
Also, I think top gear pulling power was something that surprised us, isn't it?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, but for some reason this thing just pulls from everywhere in top gear. You stick it in fifth and it stays in there forever. You can go through 30s and then you happily just pull out of the 30 zones in top gear. It accelerates amazingly well. That reminds me, it's acceleration. It's surprising how quick it is. You'd think on 30 horsepower it doesn't sound too quick, but compared to even my mum's Honda, it's pretty quick. Like I remember this speeded up to 70. From around 40 to 70 acceleration, realistic acceleration.
It did, yeah, and roll-on performance was extremely good, and the Honda is at least a claimed 47 horsepower, and this is a claimed 36, so there's quite a big horsepower difference, but you didn't feel it. I wonder if that's down to good gearing though.
Yeah, I think it is just good gearing and just, I don't know, V-twin engines. I just think, but God's engine, it just pulls so well. I think it's something you wouldn't get with a parallel twin.
Or a 4.
Or a 4. It just, I don't know, like I said, even in fifth it just pulls effortlessly.
It does perform really well, doesn't it? I think if you were comparing it to, say, a 404, this would have a way more torque pulling out of corners, and it's just a world of difference.
That's what I mean. People are always chasing horsepower, I think. People talk about the Japanese 4s of similar time. Well, of course, they have more horsepower on paper, but I can't imagine they'd feel as quick on the road. Like, the torque of this thing, I'm sure, would outperform any Japanese 4 of the same era.
400cc, you mean?
400cc.
Yeah, I think a 404 on paper makes 1 horsepower more, but it weighs more, and it definitely doesn't make the kind of torque this does. You know, it powers all at the top end. You've got to rev it. This, I was surprised when I took it out how little you do need to rev it. Really, it just pulls, doesn't it?
I think again this because Guzzis aren't really known for being revvy bikes, but this bike it does rev quite happily. You just open the throttle and it just accelerates so effortlessly. It really is. It's just fantastic, really. Just the torque.
Yeah.
Because I remember you were saying you were surprised at how torquey it was, thinking of a 350. You were expecting it to be quite sluggish, and it's really not.
No, I think probably the masterpiece of these bikes, and the thing that heaped a lot of praise on them during the late 70s and early 80s is the chassis, though. The Tonti frame is unbelievably good, I think.
Yeah, it's fantastic, really. I think it's one of the best handling bikes we own. Of course, it's a very similar frame to the V7, but I think in this package, it's such a small, light, nimble bike. It handles just amazingly. I know maybe it's just the clip-ons talking, but it feels like you can chuck it into corners and feel like a 70s racer. It's amazing.
No, it really does. I agree. Brakes?
I think the brakes are on par with the era. You're not going to be doing like nosedives with them. They do the job, but I don't know. I wouldn't put these brakes in a 100 horsepower bike. That's for sure.
No, I mean, as somebody who was around in that period, these are about as good as they got, to be honest. Still pretty wooden back then.
Yeah, from like, I haven't tried a lot of brakes of the same era, but I feel like they're on par, or you know, they're good for the time. They do the job.
I'd say so. Yeah.
It stops, so you can't complain too much.
Yeah.
It stops.
But I think the most noticeable thing about this bike, when you actually go and buy, is the exhaust note. It is terrific, isn't it, for such a small engine?
Oh, it's such a lovely sounding bike. I think again, God's engine, like the V-twin, especially from Guzzi's, they just sound so amazing. The fuel economy isn't amazing on these bikes though. It's not terrible, but if you compare it to other 350s, it's not great. It does guzzle petrol a little bit, but like.
Could the rider be playing a part there, do you think?
Yeah, I think it also could be because I'm hammering the throttle out of every corner, to be fair. But you can't deny the sweet smell of old 80s carbs when they're just that rich, petrol-y smell. I know, it might kill brain cells, but my God, does it smell good.
So, I mean, this is, in a way, kind of your first basic classic bike in terms of its overhead valve. And it's the first bike you've actually been able to do your own maintenance on. How have you found that?
Super easy, really. Again, like with the Guzzi engines, they very kindly stick the heads out of the side, so you can very easily get to the cylinder heads and do the valves. Oil changes are again easy, no chain to mess around with, and everyone knows doing your chain tension is a pain, and you don't have to worry about these on these bikes. And I think, like I was saying with the valves, like on any other bike, valves can take like hours even, especially on modern bikes. But on this, it's a 30-minute job. You just pop off the cylinders and you're there.
They're the rock covers. I mean, you don't even need to move the gas tank, do you? It's so easy. It's ridiculous.
It is easy, yeah. Another thing with these bikes, a lot of people seem to have the impression that they're very vibey, V-twins, and it puts some people off. But I think V-twins in general, especially Guzzi V-twins and this in particular, I think they do vibrate when accelerating, but when you're normally running, they're very smooth. But I think the vibration adds feel to it. It adds character. It makes it feel like you're going quicker. I don't know. When it vibrates when you whack open the throttle, the butt dyno's telling you it's going faster than it is. It feels quick, so, and it's shuddering up to speed. But
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's certainly not unpleasant. It rides. I mean, the vibe feels lovely coming through your foot pegs. You know, I don't think anybody could describe it unpleasant. And you've been quite big distances on the bike without any problems, really, haven't you?
Yeah, I think it's very easy. It's very easy to ride. Like the clutch is light, because I know with similar bikes of the same era, they can have quite heavy clutches. But I think the clutch is very, very, very usable on this.
What about the sitting position? Because you're quite tall for such a tiny bike.
But it's reasonably comfy. I think if you rode this for a whole day, for someone of my height, like my shoulders start to get a bit uncomfortable. But it's not horribly uncomfortable because I quite enjoy bikes of this sitting position.
Yeah, it's not radical. I mean, it's not NSR, is it?
No.
But it's just enough to give you a real sporty feel.
Yeah, I think I'm biased to this like seating position, but I think it does give. I feel like it gives you a nice sitting position to handle the bike quite nice, and you feel tucked in, so you're not too affected by the wind. Yeah, I think this is the best bike seating position for enjoyment. Maybe not for touring, but for just, you know, if you want to pot around for an hour and go somewhere scenic, I think bikes of this type are fantastic.
So I think the other thing that's obvious about this bike is its appearance. I mean, it looks, I think you'll agree, just sensational. It's such a pretty bike.
It's gorgeous. I think anyone who knows Guzzis knows like the Le Mans Mark 1, and it does look like a mini Le Mans. Of course, the screen I've got in mind is not original, for screen and light rather, because it would have originally had a square headlight to look more like a Le Mans Mark 4 or 5.
3.
Well,
Yeah.
I was close enough.
Close enough.
But put like, I think a previous owner put the circular headlight and this screen on, which funny enough is what got me into these bikes. I saw a picture of this exact bike on Google and just absolutely fell in love with the look of them. And a couple of years later I saw it on eBay, which I think I was very lucky for, and I happily instantly jumped on it. But it is such a gorgeous bike. You'd be fooled for thinking from the front that it was a
It's
Le Mans.
bigger, brother, yeah.
Apart from you'd be thinking it looks quite small, but it really is amazing.
Right, so the switchgear is a bit Lego-like, isn't it? How have you found it?
Yeah, the switchgear, it takes getting used to. I think it's very much of its time. It's not as nice as modern switches, and a bit it's not very intuitive, I think is a good word.
No.
Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like the switches just seem randomly placed, and they had a switchgear that they got for cheap and were just randomly selected what switches would do what. But it works. I can't complain. It does its job. I've gotten used to it, and I think it's fine.
It's quite reliable as well, actually.
Yeah, like the switch and everything. I think it's got quite a nice click to it. Of course, it's not going to be as nice as a modern switch gear, but it's fine. It's fine.
One of the big elephants in the room when you're talking about Italian bikes is reliability. People get this impression that the electrics fall apart and generally they're just plain unreliable, don't they?
I honestly don't understand where the idea with Italian bikes being unreliable has come from. All the Italian bikes that we've ever owned have been extremely reliable, and the Japanese bikes we've owned, which people rave on about, saying they're you know, God's gift to Earth, are very reliable, very broken down. We've had a lot of electrical trouble. As you were saying, like, people complain about the electrics on these, and I feel like the electrics are quite solid. We've had, you know, very little trouble. The only thing we've had on this is the battery died, which is a thing you're going to get on any bike. So I wouldn't really say that's a fault of the bike itself. But yeah, it's just, I really don't understand whether people's ideas that every bike that isn't Japanese has bad electrics.
It usually comes from people who've only ever owned Japanese bikes, I think, to be honest.
I think so as well, because
I think side by side, what I've found over the years, obviously I've ridden them for a long time, is that the reality is that the difference in terms of reliability in Italian, for example, and Japanese bikes is quite small. There isn't a huge difference. You can get the similar problems with either of them, but I don't find that one is actually head and shoulders above the other in terms of reliability. I've had as many breakdowns on Japanese bikes as Italian, at least, really. And a lot of them have been electrical. I mean, even with your bikes, your Suzuki SV had a lot of electrical faults, didn't it? And was much, much younger than this bike.
Like, some of it might just be personal experience, like you get a bad bike or something like that, but like for me personally, I've had worse experiences with Japanese bikes over Italian by a long stretch.
I think the thing is that in reality, not many people have actually owned one of these.
No.
You know, most people will give opinions on them, but a lot of them have never actually sat on one and ridden them any distance or owned one.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously we have, you know, this is not our first Guzzi by a long stretch. But also we've owned a lot of Japanese bikes at the same time, and we've had problems with both.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, I think this idea that the fact there's Japanese means it must instantly be super smooth and reliable is a bit of nonsense, really. All things, if you don't do servicing on them, if you don't look after them, they'll break. It's as simple as that, really. Would you say this was a great first classic? Is it easy to live with and easy to ride?
I think it's a fantastic first classic. I think I always try and recommend to people want a classic bike, to go for stuff like this, really. Just I think the 80s Moto Guzzi are fantastic ways to get into classic bikes. If you're a bit unsure to go for something as drastic as, I don't know, like a BSA or Triumph, a 50s BSA or Triumph, you know, with kickstart and everything, I think you can get a very classic feel from this bike without, you know, needing to kickstart. It's got a very good starter motor. It starts very easily. Of course, it's got taps which you have to remember to switch off and on, which to people who aren't used to them, it can be a thing of worry. And like I think the choke's very easy to use. Starts in the morning surprisingly easily. I've started this in winter and with a bit of throttle, and it starts very quickly. Even compared to my Ducati, you know, my Ducati's like 10, nearly 20 years later. I think even compared to Japanese bikes at the time, I remember when we went to a classic bike show and you see the Japanese bikes, when they're pressing the starter button, it's taken them time to start up, and this thing just, you press the button once and it's
they do say the starter motor comes from a Fiat car, which I think's about right, because it just wangs this tiny engine around, no bother at all.
I don't know if it'd be the same on the 500s, but after the 350, it's more than enough to start the engine. You can hear the starter motor, and it is shifting.
Yeah. Well, that transmission, that's often something and Guzzis of this year that comes in for a little stick. Certainly my V50, which is a couple of years older than this when I had it, that was quite clunky. It was like a tractor. I loved it, but it was quite a clunky device. How have you found the transmission on this one?
I quite like it, to be honest. I think it is clunky, and it does come with, in classic Guzzi fashion, a bunch of free neutrals free of charge. But I think if you've got good boots on and you're quite deliberate, you don't rush the gearbox, like you won't have any problems. Like, it has been a while since I've got a false neutral on this. You only get a false neutral when you rush it, or you're not deliberate. Of course, you have to clunk the gearbox up. They're not the smoothest gearboxes, but they're not terrible. They're quite. You have to be deliberate with them. But if you're deliberate and you're kind to them, they're good gearboxes. They click into gear quite happily, and they make a very satisfying clunk.
So what about ease of ride? I mean, some bikes, you know, particularly when they've got a sporty ride, because they're quite hard to ride. You've got to move your body around, you've got a body shift. You know, you've got to do a lot of body popping almost to try and get the thing to pull around corners. How's this thing like on the road?
It might also be due to its lightness, but this thing handles superbly at any speed. At slow speed, like it's got plenty of steering lock to do whatever you want with it, really. I'd say at high speed it handles amazingly. Of course, with the seating position, it does kind of make you want to lean off it a little bit, but you don't need to. It handles, as I've said before, like just fantastic. I think what you can get with some bikes, like my Ducati for instance, is you look where you want to go and it turns, but you have to be going quite quickly to do that. It doesn't like slow speeds, it's a little bit nervous on roundabouts, it feels like a sports bike. But this, I think it corners as easily without the drawbacks.
I think when I first rode, and the impression I got, it was kind of like, there used to be a thing called My First Car. It was like a little pedal car, and I think if you're marketing this bike, you call it My First Moto Guzzi, because it is so ridiculously easy to ride and live with.
Not just this, but any of the Moto Guzzis, the small block Guzzis of that era, I think would make fantastic bikes. I think they're all super easy to live with and ride, and if, as I said before, if you want to get into classic bikes, or you're coming off from a 125 or anything, they are such great bikes.
What other bikes or groups of bikes would you like to see a future video on? Perhaps you've got a bike we can use for a test ride. Either way, get in touch below. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, thank you very much for watching.